This is Glenn Pendlay with the Weightlifting Scoop, and I have Don McCauley and Dan Bell also with me today. And we want to talk about something that has been discussed on the coaches sub-forum, on the Pendlay forum, and that is, and yes, Don's not a member of that. He doesn't have the password. But anyway, that is strengths and weaknesses as a coach. I think it's an interesting topic because I have plenty of weaknesses as a coach. I hope I have a few strengths, but I think every coach has different things they're really good at and they're not so good at. And so, to start off, I'll go ahead and hand the mic to Dan Bell and let him maybe talk about some of the things he's good at and some of the things he might think he could improve in.
Well, let's see. I have to hold it closer. Okay.
You can improve that.
I can improve that. Well, as a coach, there's always things I think I can improve. I think I'm a decent technique coach, although I came down here to pick up more things from Don. Am I screwing that up somewhere?
Just talk about it.
All right. So I think I teach technique pretty well, especially to beginners. I've had seeing tons and tons of screwed up CrossFit lifts and beginners helps a lot. It definitely sharpens your eye. But because I've been with so many beginners, I'm not that good at programming. So I try to make it as simple as I can everywhere I can, which is another reason I came down to see you, talk more about programming. Another strength I think I have as a coach is I don't think I know everything, which is why I'm down here talking to you, talking to Don. I try to talk to the few coaches I think really have something to share. Don's already helped fix one of my lifters. John got a PR clean and jerk today, 5 kilos.
We all saw it.
Except me.
Yeah, I thought it was a great lift.
Yeah.
Well, we got it on video actually, so you might have a chance to see it in the future.
It was a 1 in a million. It was a 1 in a million lift. Yes.
Probably never make another one as beautiful as that.
I don't think I've in my life seen a lift that was quite like that. I'm glad I saw it live.
In my defense, I did wake up at 4. It's been a long, tiring weekend. I'm sure I'll see it. I'm sure I'll see the 160 this week when you hit that.
There you go.
What about you, Don?
Weaknesses. Back room warm-up room. Counting attempts, making sure I got the right tactics.
You've told me that before, to never, ever allow you to count attempts.
Absolutely not.
Because Don's helped me with some of the guys I coach in the back room
not.
before. He's very uncomfortable with
that. I have done it correctly before. I usually do it best when I've got one person involved, and that's it. But others are better at it than me. It's where the worst of my ADD shows up. I'm good at warming people up in the back room. I'm picking attempts, but I really have to, I usually have attempt numbers written on my palm. And you've seen that, Glenn. I write things down on my palm and just count the number of attempts I've got till a lifter gets up. And I'm just not that good at it. I'm better at fixing things with people.
Well, let me ask you this. Have you handled great numbers of lifters in competition? Have you been in a situation where you've got 3 guys in the competition in the same flight, and you've got to coach multiple people at the same time? Have you been in that situation a whole bunch of times?
No, and I think that's part of it, and I think that's something that can be learned to be done better. I think there are always people that are more natural at certain things, but I think if you don't have, as you did, you came up and you were handling a bunch of guys right away. And you were forced into, doing it.
Yeah, I think I'm reasonably good at counting attempts and all that, but I've had many, many, many situations where I was handling 4 or 5 or even 6 guys in the same session.
Yeah.
At say junior nationals or school age nationals, and what I got to hear from both you guys is you're good at what you've done a lot.
Yeah.
And both in Don and your cases, you're saying you're not so good at stuff that you haven't had a ton of chance to do.
Yeah, and I don't think a lot of coaches get those chances. I mean, some do, but I think a lot of coaches don't, and therefore they're not comfortable or as comfortable with it. I usually have plans before I go into a session, what I think my athlete can do, what I know other athletes have done, and I can watch other athletes in the room pretty good and see what I think they're going to do today. But if you haven't handled 2 or 3 people in the same session, or 4 or 5, I think that's always a thing that, one, you may not ever have a chance to get better at it because you may not get in that situation.
Well, unless you're coaching a lot of young lifters, and you're right. I went through a multi-year period where between say junior Olympics even, or school age nationals, junior nationals, I had I've had taken 20 plus kids to both junior nationals and school age several different times, and had multiple guys in the same sessions. And I think the most I ever had, that I can remember in any kind of a decently sized meet was 6 kids in one session at junior nationals.
Yeah.
And that, that's probably why I feel like I'm decent at it. Just having to practice.
Yeah. Dan, I don't know if you've ever had the practice to do that kind of thing or not. I really.
Yeah, and I ran and got help.
There you go.
I found a coach I trust that didn't have somebody in that session, and I got help.
Yeah, I usually try to get help myself, because it's when you get to a meet like that, when you get to a pretty big meet, that's not the time for you to practice how good you can get.
No,
you want to make sure the kid gets out there at the right times, and if I have to ask for help from that, I've got no problems doing that.
Well, I don't know how many people know this, but at the trials last year, we had 4 coaches with Holly. We even have one guy on an iPad with a spreadsheet figuring out to the kilo what she needed in the moment.
That's right, because you were caught up in something that needed Sinclair formula too.
Exactly.
Yeah, which is another added pressure.
So we had 2 strategy guys, me trying to keep her on the floor instead of floating away, and another guy on a spreadsheet.
Yeah. Man.
So.
And there ain't nothing wrong with that as far as I'm concerned.
Well, she made it. So.
Yeah, she made it. Then that's it. That's what you do, what you have to do.
Who has always struck me when it comes to, not to beat the handling people in competition subject to death, but Lou DeMarco, I think, is excellent with lifters in competition. I've had him help me handle people in competition multiple times, just because I felt like his personality, his presence, whatever, was going to help them get more out of themselves that day, rather than just me alone back there. Have you ever watched Lou DeMarco in the back room?
I've watched him. I haven't watched him that closely, but again, Lou's one of those guys that seems very comfortable in that situation. He looks calm, and that's really good.
He's calm, and he has a great sense of when to get in somebody's face and say, lift the damn bar, and when to back off. He's just got a great sense of interaction with people.
Yeah, I haven't really been that close to lifters that he's worked with to see that, but I know his people are always they're always in the chairs at the right time. They're always out on deck when they should be. They're not rushed.
Yeah.
And then that's good. You want the guy to be comfortable. You want to give them the best attempt to make it, and like I say, sometimes you bring in help to do that, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Well, or even help, I went, I think, pretty far when I first started coaching, trying one way or the other, whether honestly or even dishonestly, to learn what I could from, coaches that I kind of looked up to. And Lou always struck me as somebody that you watch him in the back room with people, and he's just very in control and very able to get the lifter in the right state of mind at the right time.
Yeah.
Not too soon, not too late.
Yeah.
And so over, multiple years, I've asked Lou at any meet I saw him at, or do you have anybody in the session that I have my guy or guys, would you mind kind of backstopping me and hanging out and, whatever. Both from the feeling that it would help the lifters. I sincerely believe that if I have a lifter that's in, a very important situation, that I'm better off with Lou there than not there. And also to learn, he just struck me fairly early in my coaching career, I guess, as somebody that to me looked like someone I should emulate when it comes to handling people in the back room.
Yeah.
And the more time I've had him assist me or been able to watch him, whatever, I feel like it's been positive for me to learn to do it better.
Yeah, I've always been, well, as you know, it's always been the numbers with me. Yeah, that's my weakness there, and I've counted on a few times, as you know, Stephen Powell. I've had him. I've always felt pretty comfortable being with the athletes,
Right.
as far as the warm-ups and stuff, and as far as giving them a pretty good feel. And if I have to get them going, I get them going and stuff like that. I want to make sure of the numbers. Powell's always been good at numbers. And plus he's, as I always tell him, he's tall and I can see him across a room. It's like I'm not going to lose him. So
Yeah.
I have that safety thing going where I can turn around quick and see where he is and he can give me the numbers and I'm fine. I know where I should be then.
Right.
So sometimes you need that. That calms me down.
Yeah. Well, it's a nice feeling when you have somebody else. To tell you the truth, Travis Cooper is really good with the numbers, and I would feel pretty good. I mean, Travis is one of the lifters, and obviously there's situations where that's not going to work, but somebody else on the team, that needs a certain number, needs a certain percentage of the world team total or this or that. I feel pretty comfortable when Travis is calculating it as well as I am, or calculating it for me or something.
Yeah.
I think there's really two aspects to that. Like, one aspect is someone that makes you feel better and that you are confident that they'll come up with the right attempt to the number, or tell you when your lifter's 6 out, when he's actually 6 out and not really 3 out or whatever. Yeah. But another aspect is, I think, is surrounding yourself with coaches that you feel do that particular job better than you.
Yeah.
That's something over, 20 years I've tried to do as much as I possibly could, is try to be with people, whether it's asking them to assist me or assisting them, associate myself in situations where I thought I could learn something from somebody.
Yeah.
And, John Thrush, I know this girl, and her name's just a blank, the girl that went to the Olympics in 2004, Melanie Roach. Yeah. At the World Team Trials in 2002 or 3, I think it was the one that was in Santo Domingo. Was that in 2003? Two. Yeah. Okay. John asked me to kind of help when he warmed Melanie Roach up for, it was in Florida, I believe.
Yeah.
And I obviously jumped at that time. I didn't have as much experience as I have now, and the chance to just load weights.
Yeah.
Load weights and count attempts. And basically just watch what I considered a pretty dang good coach, pretty experienced coach, and a great lifter, a wonderful lifter.
Oh, yeah.
And just see what happened as she was, warming up for an important meet. I mean, things like that have been super important to me as far as making me more comfortable in those situations, and a better coach is just, tagging along when possible, or associating when possible with people that I thought had some experience, knowledge, whatever, that I didn't have.
Yeah.
What do you think of that, Dan? I got to get you back in the game here.
I'm trying. I was trying to think of all the people I've worked with. When I was talking before about the four of us with Holly, Mark Cannella he is probably one of the best people I've seen at picking attempts. If he gets to know a lifter, and this is a skill I don't think I have yet. I've seen him time and time again be able to tell within a kilo what a lifter is capable of that day. And, I've had to tell lifters that we both work with, don't doubt him. He's going to be right. If he says you're good for 146, you're good for 146, not 147. I think that was really important. Him choosing the weights for the Olympic trials. He realized he didn't have to beat Sarah to be on the team.
Right. And
he picked weights that what was her name? No, it's the other heavyweight. Yeah. He made sure that he picked weights that would get Holly on the team, but push Chioma to a PR attempt. Something she'd never loaded on the bar. I was pretty impressed by that. I learned from that. I don't know if I'm good at it yet. Hope to be in the situation again and find out.
Yeah.
But if I'm in that situation again, I'll still run to coaches that are good to get help.
What do you, when it comes to, you said, Dan, that most of your, at least recent experience was with CrossFitters. People that aren't as good or as experienced with the lifts, correcting errors and this and that. Do you think that working a lot with that type of beginner has had any negative impact on you doing things like programming or watching the technique of or whatever more experienced lifters, maybe somebody like Holly?
Yeah, I'm a big believer in use it or lose it. And if you're, I think the people are always screaming there's too much focus on technique are wrong. But when you're working with constantly trying to correct technique with beginners, you get really focused on that. And, the complexities of programming, individualizing programming, you just don't pay as much attention to it because you don't get a chance to do it as often. I didn't have my own club again until, Rubber City's, 6-8 months old. It's not even a year old. So now I'm getting some more advanced lifters. I have to start thinking about that again. I hope I'm doing a good job of it. John seems to be getting better.
He got a PR today.
Yeah.
Did you see that? Okay. Sorry.
No, I almost saw that.
It's a good point. It's a good point though, because you do. I've recently, and I was another one that didn't have a real lifting gym situation for a long time on my own. Did a lot of CrossFitters and did a lot of real beginners, and I hadn't done programming for quite a while, and then happened on a couple of lifters, and had to sort of, whoa, wait, I got to pick that up again. Got to get what are the right numbers here? What have I got to do with this guy? And you have to sort of double think it again. You have to get back in the game with it.
Well, I think that's why so many people are interested in what Glenn does. He's got a great laboratory for figuring out what works and what doesn't work, along with tons of experience with lots of lifters. I think he's got a great overview of the kinds of things that really work, especially with advanced lifters.
Well, I, like most people, when I started out coaching, I was mostly coaching, middle school, high school, and then collegiate, and then, whatever, just like everybody else. But one question that I think is an interesting question, and I've heard this mentioned in multiple places, but not really discussed as far as the pros and cons of it, that some people should specialize. And for instance, people that are just very good working with beginners, whether it be because of their enthusiasm, whether it be because they're pretty good at teaching, decent technique and getting people on the right path. I think a lot of it's mental. Who's the guy from I'm not going to be able to think of his name. The guy from Kansas, short guy that competed in nationals all the way up till he was like 50.
Oh, he's God Almighty, forgetting his name. He's got his daughter was a lifter too.
Yeah, his daughter made the junior world team. Gene Gilsdorf.
Gene Gilsdorf, yes.
That guy is the best beginner's coach.
Thank God we've got Travis here.
Yeah, thank gosh Travis
obviously
is here.
We have no memories left.
Gene is
at
the
all.
greatest beginner's coach because he must have been lifting for 50 years now.
Yeah.
From a young age and all the way up. I think he still qualified for nationals when he was in his late 40s, or placed like third at nationals when he was in his late 40s.
Yes, he did.
And he still gets as excited as I'm sure he did 30 years ago when a 10-year-old kid hits a 2-kilo PR in a snatch.
Yep.
Goes from 40 to 42. He jumps 6 feet in the air, hugs him, picks him up off the ground, twirls him around. He has an unbelievable level of enthusiasm. And I think that there are some people that just have that. They don't lose it. And frankly, it's just admirable, because there's other people that they've been in the sport for 20 years, and whether this 10-year-old kid snatches 35 or snatches a 2-kilo PR and does 42, they're not emotionally involved anymore. They may have been their first 2 or 3 years in the sport, but 20 years later, it's just the 1,000th kid they've seen snatch 40 kilos, and they're just not emotionally involved.
Yeah.
And I think people that have that level of enthusiasm and they keep it over the years, they're great beginner coaches, not necessarily because they don't have the skills to coach higher level lifters, or not maybe, for any reason like that. It's just the attitude and the emotion that they bring to it is what younger lifters and beginners react to. And you have other coaches that have that personality that is just, they may be great coaches, but they just don't have the personality that's going to excite, motivate, reward, et cetera, a beginner lifter, especially a young one. And I think in this country, there's an awful lot, because I suppose it's just the prestige of coaching good lifters, or the supposed value of yourself as a coach if you coach somebody that is on the way to the worlds versus some, kid who's trying to, qualify for junior nationals. That nobody hands off a lifter.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to say, this is what I'm good at and I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
Or, there's a real value associated with coaching better lifters.
Yeah, well, the reward system in our organization is such that...
And the reward system is that you get rewarded
for having the world team members.
Yeah,
You're not rewarded for bringing along 8-year-olds. No. And that's wrong.
And I think there's some people that are really, really great at bringing along 8 or 10-year-olds. And it's too bad that there's no, social status really gained by that, or no reward system in place. It's only the people that are coaching, guys like Travis Cooper or something are the people that get rewarded. And that, frankly, they might not be as good of a coach as somebody that's bringing along 8-year-olds. They might not be near as good at developing young lifters as some other coach. And obviously, if you want to get somebody from the beginner stage when they're 12 or 15 or whenever up to the level of a guy like Travis Cooper, it takes, everybody's equally as important, in my opinion.
Sure. Sure. In gymnastics, they have their organization rewards coaches that coach beginners.
Right.
If they have beginners come out of their school that are going to go on to the next level, those coaches are supported by the organization as much as anybody, because the organization in gymnastics realizes this is where we get the people that become world champions.
I think in weightlifting, at least in the U.S., because the reward system only really applies to those coaching the oldest, most advanced athletes, there's a real hesitancy to let go of somebody, to do what you're good at and let go of somebody. Or for that matter, it's almost like it's gotten into some kind of a big dick measuring contest, to tell you the truth. Is like who coaches who and who coached who. And there's a lot of places, and this is not to pat myself on the back in any way really, but there's a lot of cases where someone's coaching a few decent lifters and they're not going to want another coach to come in and give their 2 cents worth. They're not going to want to publicly say, yeah, this guy helped me, or I've learned here, or I've learned there. This guy corrected a fault that I didn't see, or I picked, my programming was a little off, nothing was going right, and I called on this person to try to, help a little bit or something. Because everybody is so jealously fighting over, I coach this guy and I coach this guy. I think one of the nicest things about the muscle driver team is, we've had Don in a fair amount of times, and I have no hesitation in saying there's a couple of the lifters especially, no doubt some for all of them, but a couple especially where, the time he's been able to spend with them and things that he's been able to make them aware of or whatever, it's helped tremendously. Absolutely tremendously. And, I think the whole people wanting to get all the credit themselves, do it all themselves, very jealous of anyone else having an input, is something that does hurt USA weightlifting.
Absolutely.
Because it doesn't put the athlete first. And I think I was talking to you and Don about this earlier, that coaches get into a rut. I get into a rut of what I see, especially with beginners. If beginners, you're looking to create a gross motor pattern. You can't pick every detail and have 42 different details in their mind when they're trying to do something. You're looking to get them in a halfway decent looking movement, but you start to lose your eye for other things. Like John, he came in and Don noticed he'd been starting with the bar slap up against his shins, and it was forcing him to come out a little bit off the floor. He widened his grip a little bit, moved the bar half an inch or an inch off his shins, and he hits a PR clean and jerk today. Anytime I can get an athlete of mine help like that, I'm going to take it.
Yeah, and I think all of this is true, and in our again, the organization has been set up like this. Lifting has been like this forever. I think it's silly. I think in some of the older teams, even in York, which was the Hoffman-driven team, there were several coaches that worked at York, and all of them became well known enough, I guess. But they all helped different guys in different ways. And the lifters there, too, helped each other. There was a lot of lifter interaction.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. As far as everything I've ever heard, the lifters, in large part, not in 100%, but in large part, coached each other.
Well, I think there was an awful lot. And I think the lifters, in some cases, especially in the York situation, knew a lot more. and they had also been in contact, and we've talked about him before. Most of the lifters there, or a good number of the lifters that ended up at York, had been in contact with Joe Mills back in Rhode Island, who, in my estimation, was our greatest natural coach that we ever had. And again, it goes back to there too, where Joe Mills was almost shunned by most of the coaching hierarchy because of how he was and what he was. They didn't like that. He didn't fit the mold, and they didn't like that at all. But the lifters all sort of flocked to him, and the coaches that knew better, trusted his judgment if he told them something. And I think there should be a lot more of that today. I don't see anybody, that should be coaching all alone in this country. I think you're better off bringing some people in and having them help out with what you feel they can do better or whatever. That can be a great help to the lifters.
I just think, in general, knowing that you have weaknesses, knowing that you're not great at everything, that, number one, that there's some things that you're not going to see.
Yeah.
And the third, and I think this is sometimes a little bit overlooked, is that, well, for instance, you've worked with Tom in particular a lot.
Mm.
Sometimes when you're coaching him, I feel like, damn it, Tom, I've been telling you that for 3 weeks.
Oh, yeah.
And now Don says it, and all of a sudden you do. And, but the fact of the matter is, well, it's great. It's great because we're not telling two different things, maybe in two different ways.
Yeah.
And sometimes, how many times I have seen somebody at a seminar or in some other instance, and I've said, okay, push the bar back off the floor or stay on your heels, and they do it.
Yeah.
And then the gym owner's standing there, and they're like, I've been telling you that for a month.
Yep.
Well, it's almost like a joke. Yeah, you do it when he tells you, but, when I told you, you didn't pay attention. I'm like, well, that happens to me both sides of the coin. I'm the guy sometimes that's the new guy that shows up for one day, and I say something and they get it and they listen and they do it right. And I'm also the guy that feels like sometimes I've been saying it for a month, and then Don McCauley shows up and all of a sudden they listen to him.
I'm paying Tom to say that to you.
Well, yeah, I figured you were. But I mean, the point is you can hear the same thing from the same person.
Yeah.
Again. It just doesn't click. And then somebody else says it, whether it's just coming from a different mouth or whether it's said in a slightly different way, demonstrated slightly differently, whatever, all of a sudden it clicks and it makes sense for the lifter.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And as a coach, to so jealously guard your lifters because you want all the credit and you don't want anybody thinking that some other coach, helped or this or that. That's really stupid, I think.
Especially in a country that's finishing 37th in the world right now.
Well,
I think we shouldn't be that crazy.
Recognizing that you have weaknesses and recognizing that you can't say the right thing all the time for every lifter, and then allowing somebody else to walk in and help out a little bit, give their 2 cents worth and see if it helps. All those things, I think, make you a much more valuable coach to the athlete.
One of the things that I think has always been missing, and we've kind of hit upon it here a little bit in weightlifting, is kind of a general apprenticeship of coaches under other coaches and going to other places and being able to help out and find out and learn from other coaches. I think there's been an awful lot of guarded things. I think the organization has brought out a lot of that, and maybe just the type of sport. It's an individual sport, and you want to hold on to your kid type of thing. But we need a lot more apprenticeship, and we should have a lot more cooperation than we do. And I think that, again, the lifters will all do better because of it. Nobody's got nearly all the answers.
During this discussion, there's something I wondered. I mean, you guys know this term, genius maker. I think we all know coaches who probably aren't that good, but they got a freak athlete. Suddenly got them up to the international level, and they were a genius. We also all know coaches who are really good coaches and haven't had that that guy or that girl come along yet. Yep. I just wonder what you guys think of that concept.
Well, I think it's entirely true. Even a coach that's consistently had really good athletes and has, you can name 3 or 4. You take away those 3 or 4 people, and nobody knows who they are. And so, especially people that have, never had any spectacular athlete, and they have one person that goes to the Olympics or something. I mean, yeah, that's great, and obviously, you can't fault them for that. But yeah, you can't always measure. The worth of someone by their one best athlete, for sure. It's absolutely impossible. And I'll be the first to say, I mean, I have, I've had a couple of different years where I've had 3 of the 8, Pan Am team members that have come from me, and pretty high, I guess you'd say, production for international teams and whatnot. I'll be the first to admit part of that is just the situations that I've been in. Yeah. At Cal Strength, and then especially here. I mean, we have some abilities to attract good athletes, whether they're good weightlifters or just good athletes that came into weightlifting because of the opportunities here that obviously other coaches don't have. And that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm, a better coach than someone that's not in that situation, because they can't create a situation that's advantageous to an athlete the way that, Muscle Driver USA can.
Yeah.
I think that, being able, like I said, both in Wichita Falls, here, at Cal Strength, being able to have and attract good athletes, I think has definitely made me a better coach because I've had a fair amount of experience with guys that are at that level. But, how much of that is a situation that you're in and how much of it is your actual coaching ability, I don't know. And I think that's always suspect. It's always a question you have to ask. I think if you're in those great situations, wherever they are, you certainly can't let it go to your head and say, I'm not going to listen to anybody or, whatever, because, hey, I've got, 2 guys on the world team or this or that. I think a lot of what that stems from is there's just so much mistrust between coaches. Everybody's trying to claw their way to the top and claw their way over the bodies of anybody else because you don't trust anybody else. And the way the reward system is handed out, people, zealously guard whatever good lifter they have from interactions or any possible interpretation that they're not totally responsible for that athlete. And I think all that comes together just to mean that there's just less cooperation between different coaches, less ability to take someone else that might have some skill that you don't have or something and productively use their expertise along with whatever you might have. There's just less of that ability, and what it gets back to is none of us is the best at every single aspect of coaching, but too few people want to recognize that.
Yeah. Go ahead, Dan. I'm on this.
Well, I've helped get one person to the international level, but coach so many local level and bottom of the A session, B session lifters at nationals, and I wonder myself, every coach has self-doubt. So I'm always trying to go out and reinforce what I know, learn new things. I mean, most of the time I find out, I was right about that. Other good coaches agree about that. And sometimes I pick up something new. Trips like this are invaluable. Speaking of which, mind if I throw John on here and, let him toss in what he's learned from this trip?
Go ahead.
All right. Should say the name or anything?
No, nobody.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
remember I gave you that 20 before too.
Yeah. Well, some things that I've learned on this trip. Well, they've said it so far. Technique-wise, moving my hands out, kept the bar closer, keeping it away from my shins, allowed the bar to stay, the power to stay in the middle of my foot. But other than that, I thought it was a great experience being a muscle driver, seeing those guys lift. Really put a perspective in what it takes to train at that kind of level. Yeah, I mean, when I go back to Akron, I'm going to try and keep that mentality going, even without them being there. But
it's funny. It's funny, but I mean, a lot, the same with walking in, when I was at Cal Strength, we had several guys there that were pretty good lifters, that were some of the top lifters in the U.S., and even more so here at Muscle Driver. But when you haven't trained with everybody and you walk in and train and people are lifting big weights on, 5 or 6 different platforms, it's almost hard not to make a PR because your adrenaline goes and,
oh, yeah.
You see Travis hitting a big lift and Tom clean and jerking big and Mike doing big weights for as small as he is anyway.
I hope he's listening.
I can't do a podcast without poking fun at Mike.
No, okay.
But you see everything happening around you, and I mean, I always thought one of the biggest advantages that we had in developing lifters through the high school and whatever ages in Wichita Falls, where we had a pretty big school age team, a 12, 15, 16-year-old kids, a pretty good high school team or junior team, guys that were 18, 19. Then we had a couple of, senior level lifters, that were good, very good. At one point we had 8 guys in a room at one time that were all clean and jerking over 400 pounds. But the guys that were 12 and 15 that were more beginners, they had guys clean and jerking 180, 190, whatever, all around them every other day. And so how can you think that 100-kilo clean and jerk when you're, 13 is big when you have every platform around you that are lifting twice that weight?
Yeah.
And it just opens your mind and motivates you, because instead of looking at a 100 clean and jerk or a 130 clean and jerk as, oh, this is so heavy and this is so big, you're like, I need to get past this weight right now because this ain't nothing. And it's just that mindset that it creates when you're lifting with good lifters. Like I said, it's almost hard not to PR when you first step into that situation.
Yeah, it's pretty much just like the atmosphere. I didn't really think that I needed to try any harder when I was doing my lifts. I just saw that, the weights that I'm at right now are not that big of a deal. So I have to train a lot harder, but seeing Travis and some of the other guys lift, it kind of showed me that, hey, I've got a while to go. So being in that type of atmosphere was definitely worth driving, a good 7-8 hours? 11 to Don's, yeah.
Well, that's I think, it's one of the things. Glenn's had, the good fortune to be in that situation for a long time and obviously done great. I think Dan and I are more typical of the American weightlifting coach, where you're out there some East Chepeake, wherever, and, you've got a couple of lifters and it's a small world, and you're an amateur coach, really. I mean, you're not being paid to do anything. And they come few and far between, and you get a little world view of things. Going to a place for any lifter that's in that situation, going to a place like Muscle Driver or even Wichita Falls when you were there, with that multitude of great lifting, lifters going and a lot of weight being slung around, it's bound to help the lifter that's a little more of the beginner to see the bigger picture to know that, I'm doing this right now. But I want to go there. Yeah. I want to go there, and it looks like several humans can do that.
Well, I don't think the 13, 14-year-old guys in Wichita Falls ever realized how lucky they were to begin
probably not
their first year or two of lifting in a situation where, like I said, there were times when we had, 7 or 8 guys in the room doing 400-pound plus clean and jerks. And to begin as a young 13-year-old in that situation, I don't think they ever knew how lucky they were, but it was a great situation for beginning lifters.
Sure it was.
It was a great situation.
And that's going to spawn more good lifters. It's bound
Absolutely.
to,
Absolutely.
Which is one of the things that you see in other countries that happens.
Yeah.
It's,
Well, we've talked for a half an hour now on, kind of what our weaknesses are as a coach and how we have tried to, fix that basically and let other coaches help or model after other coaches that are better at that particular thing. But what do you think as American weightlifting coaches, what can we do to help fix that problem? Is there anything that can fix that problem in this country and make us more cooperative, more appreciative of the guys that are good at coaching beginners, more willing and able to let our colleagues help and even take some of the credit when the credit is warranted?
I personally think that, and you and I kind of agree on this, that CrossFit has become the biggest source of our advancement of late, and probably it's going to be the biggest source of U.S. weightlifting advancement, period. I think the numbers, if the sport grows, these situations will become more common. With the sport as small as it's been, I think the same thing is going to happen again and again and again. Coaches are going to become protective. It's the only way they can get ranking themselves is to have an athlete that gets to the Worlds. I think if the sport starts to get 30, 40,000 lifters, a little more cooperation is going to occur. You're going to have people spreading out and finding situations where they're going to call in different people and they're going to have them more often. And also more coaches are going to become professional coaches, where they're at least partly subsidized by the fact that they are coaches. They're making a fair living at it, and it's going to make a difference.
I think that both of those things are so true. I think with a huge scarcity of lifters, and particularly talented lifters, everybody going to fight over it, just like in any economic situation where there's a scarcity of a product, people are going to fight over gold. And as the product, talented lifters, becomes less scarce, that's not going to happen as much. And I think that's already somewhat the case. And you guys just saw today a lifter that no one's ever heard of, that's never been to nationals, snatch 150 as an 85. And no one knows this kid even exists or is into the sport of Olympic weightlifting. That's going to happen more, that are people that are drawn into the sport that have talent and you don't have to fight over 9 coaches don't have to fight over credit for one guy, That's going to happen. That's going to happen more. I also think that it is within the realm of human possibility that people just plain old stop being so scared to ask for advice or ask for help. And I don't completely understand why people are so much that way, because maybe that's one of my greatest strengths as a coach is that I don't think I've ever really been that way. I've always sought out ideas, advice, whatever, from other coaches since the first time I was in the sport. I've done that. And so if I do have a big strength as a coach, maybe it's that I haven't, that I've actually went to other people for advice and not been that jealous with my lifters. But, I think it's possible that people just settle down a little bit and say, you know what, the athlete comes first. If we're going to get this guy to the Worlds, maybe we've got a little easier time of it by talking to someone else who's maybe had more experience programming for elite athletes, or somebody who is a good technique coach, and it might do the guy good to let him have some input. I think even above and beyond are just general situation changing. Admitting that and putting the athlete first can be a lot better done.
Yeah, I'm going to give some props here to Danny over here on a small, and we're still on a very small scale where there have been very few good athletes. I mean, he had inherited Holly from Chris Cleary, am I right? And Chris knew the situation with coaching would be better with Dan. Dan, in turn, knew he wasn't at that time in a situation where he could see Holly all that much, and sent her down to me for a couple of summers to get teched up. And let's face it, I'm a tech wonk. That's kind of what I do best, is I kind of fix things a little bit. And then things changed again, and Dan knew that Mark had a better situation for Holly and sent her to Dan, who, of course, they were good friends anyway, coaching friends and lifting friends and just friends. But that was a situation where 3 or 4, 5 coaches had a part in getting one athlete to the Olympics, as it turned out. And you did what you did. I mean, and nobody cared, nobody cared who got credit. We wanted to get the kid to the Olympics. I think that's going to happen more and more, where you have teams of coaches, just like you have football teams that have several coaches for several different positions. I think you're going to have weightlifting coaches who are used either in the same place as consultants, or travel as being consultants for this or that in our sport. I think that's going to happen, fairly soon. What do you think?
I think that is absolutely great, and I think that's probably where we ought to end. But
well, I had actually something just very quickly.
There you go, Travis.
So one thing that tied in, there's something in psychology called the Dunning-Kruger effect, and it's like when you know nothing, your confidence is sky high. And then the more you are into, when you're learning more about something, your confidence dips down until you become an expert. So I was wondering, specifically with you and Don, did you guys ever experience this? Like when you had your first good athlete, was your confidence sky high? How did you feel about yourself? And was it, when it was hard to replicate it, did your confidence dip down?
I don't think I ever really went through that. I had a couple of athletes in a couple of different sports. I was a throws coach. I had a couple of good athletes, state champion level, but I had a lot of athletes that were just regular kind of high school athletes. So I didn't have that one athlete in one sport that was just bang, and I think I'm, all that. But I think that's generally true. I think if you have a lot of success with very few athletes at first, you start to think that maybe I just know everything and nobody else knows anything. And then if you get in a bigger world of things, you realize, oh, maybe that was not true.
I know I went through that a lot. It wasn't too long after I first started coaching weightlifting. I had a kid that was very young, 16, I think, at the time, qualified for nationals. And after not training very much, of course, my thinking is, well, this isn't hard, I mean, well, we just did some squats and showed him how to clean and jerk, and all of a sudden, he's like the youngest guy qualified for nationals this year. I don't think he went to national. I think he went to, this was like 1995 or so. I think he went to the American Open that year. For one reason or another, he couldn't go to nationals, But sure, I remember, and I probably actually went through that a couple of different times, probably went through it again later, 5 or 6 years later when I was coaching in Wichita Falls, but, that was in Kansas. But yeah, absolutely. I thought, I don't know why the people debate on this on Go Heavy constantly, and everybody's mad at each other. I think the kid was a 77. I'm like, you just squat, 440, which that seemed fairly easy because, like I said, he was an absolute freak athlete. And practice the snatch and clean and jerk and viola, there it goes. And obviously I didn't replicate that for several years again. It wasn't as easy as I thought. So, yeah, absolutely. I don't think I've ever returned to the same level of coaching confidence I had in 1995. So that definitely describes my confidence fluctuations as a coach to a T.
Yeah, I just thought that was interesting and something to think about as a coach because, the more you learn about something, the more you realize that you don't know anything really, because there's an infinite amount of things that you can learn pretty much about anything. So that kind of goes with weightlifting as well. Absolutely.
And I think after that probably is a good time to wrap it up.
I've got no confidence left now.
All right. We'll see y'all in another few days with another episode.